Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Online Smicha. Now that we're in the midst of Chodesh Elul, the preparations for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Yom Noraim, there is a minig Yisrael, that applies to the opening of the school year, as same we find something that we do on Rosh Hashanah. Everybody knows that on Rosh Hashanah night, we eat tapuach masuk bidvash, a sweet apple in honey, and it's customary also that in the opening of a school year, many of the children that are coming to school for the first time, and they're seeing the Aleph Beis, they're studying in the Cheder, a Reinfer in the Cheder, so they throw candies on the children, symbolic, as the Malach Michal is showing them how Torah is sweet, and they also put honey on the charts of the Aleph Beis, and the kid licks off some of the honey as a symbolic to show a symbol that Torah is sweet. We keep on finding over and over again that whenever we try to emphasize sweetness, we emphasize it with dvash, honey. Now you may find that there are many other things that might be sweeter than honey. Incidentally, when it comes to the minig of Rosh Hashanah to dip an apple in honey, it says clearly, and there's a diuk, that the tapuach itself is a tapuach masuk, a sweet apple dipped into honey. You don't take a sour apple, you take a sweet apple. Yet there's something unique about dvash, honey. Now, bichlal, in Torah, the word dvash doesn't necessarily mean bees' honey. It doesn't even necessarily mean honey. When the Torah says, Ki chol se'or v'chol dvash lo saktiru, any bitterness or any dvash should not be brought on the mizbeach. Dvash over there means kol misikas pri, any sweets of a fruit. So dvash in the Torah language doesn't necessarily mean bees' honey. Yet beloshin chachamim, usually when the Gemara refers to dvash, usually it's referred to bees' honey. As you know, honey can be made from different things, different ways, but usually it's referred to as bees' honey. And the question is, what's the diuk? What are we emphasizing by specifically showing the sweetness and hoping and praying that our year will be sweet like honey is sweet? What is unique about honey? So the halachic point you have to understand first is that honey should be a shaila why it's even kosher, because honey comes from bees. This bee's honey comes from bees, and bee is a non-kosher species. You're not allowed to eat a bee. Yet the Gemara in Bechoros says, the Gemara in Bechoros asks that question, and the Gemara says, "Mipnei shahadvarim machnisois oisan legufam ve'ein mematzeis oisan migufam." Whereas many other things that we know come from an animal that's non-kosher, we're not allowed to eat because it's part of the animal. Whereas anything that comes from a tameh is tameh too. Whereas the honey from a bee, it's not part of the bee. It eats something and it develops, it makes the honey, but it's not part of it. And therefore, there's no issues as Eivim and Achai, it's not Yotzim and Tameh, and honey is unique that it's kosher even though it comes from a tameh. What else we find very, very, very different than many, many other halachas is if somebody were to be making honey and he wasn't the most professional in what he did, and he happened to crush in some raglei hadavarim. Raglei hadavarim are even the small legs from the bees. A bee's leg is definitely not kosher. This is one of the exceptions to the rule where something small, like the raglei hadvarim, if it got crushed into the honey, it could be ignored and it's bottle, and it's not the time to talk about the reasons for this, but this is an exception to the rule, where something which not only it didn't come from it, but perhaps even if some of the non-kosher is mixed and lost in the dvash, we could ignore. So we find two explanations. From this we could see two unique points about dvash. First of all, it's created through a tamei, and perhaps sometimes even more, the parts of tamei are in there, and it could be diluted, it could be lost. So in some Sfarim it says that is perhaps what we are asking and praying for during the month of Tishrei, during the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. What we are saying is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there are two types of life. There are two types of happiness. There is a fruit, there is sugar, or all those type of sweet items that are sweet. There is no bitterness to it. It's tasty, it's yummy, and life is perfect. But we are realistic, and we know that life is full of bumps, full of challenges, and at the end, we hope and pray that those bumps and challenges will also turn out to be sweet. So perhaps we're acknowledging to HaKadosh Baruch Hu the combination of the two. We understand there is the apple, and the apple is a masuk, a sweet apple. That is in a perfect world. But we also acknowledge that we are hoping at least there should be like honey, where it comes from a tamei, it comes from a bee, and the bee stings, and things are not always picture perfect, but at the end, it produces something sweet, something like honey. And not only it produces something like honey, it can actually transform the parts of the bee, which are not kosher. It could be ignored, it could be lost and diluted in the bee, in the honey, and yet it will be kosher to eat. Al derech hatzachus, we find it says in Sfarim that even though the Rambam says hadvash ra liktanim v'yofe liskenim, dvash is not something which is very healthy for young children to eat, but for zkenim, for elder people, it is good. Again, we emphasize it on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because we're acknowledging the Metzias. It says in different Sfarim, we know that in the Goyish, in the secular world, it's called a honeymoon. In Hebrew, it's called a yerach dvash. Why is it yerach dvash? Why honey? So it's interesting. Gematria, dvash, dalid, vez, shin, has the same numerical value as isha, as woman. And therefore, we get this title, yerach dvash. Speaking about this point, I want to conclude with another nekuda, that one of the things we do on the night of Rosh Hashanah is we eat the head of the fish, and some say shania liroish v'loy lezonov. We should be like to the head, like a head. People translate it like a head. We should be a head and not a tail. So there are two questions. Question number one is, it doesn't say we should be roish. It says we should be liroish, to a head. The second question is, the opposite, the other end of the head is not the tail, is the feet, the legs. So you should say, shania liroish, v'loy liregel, not like feet. So the Hasidic answer is, liroish, none of us, we know that we are not roish. Roish, a Rebbe, is roish b'nei Yisrael, is the Rebbe. I can't be a Rebbe. But we pray, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shania liroish. We should be blessed that we should be mikusher to the roish. And perhaps Sfarim say, liroish is also a Rashi Tevis. La'asos ritzoin avicha shebeshamayim. To do the will of God. And for that, we need somebody to guide us. We need to be mikusher to a roish. Why not say liregel? The answer is, the roish and the zonov, the roish, the head and the tail, are opposites in the type of aver it is. The roish, the head, the brain, is surrounded with a skull. The skull is a very hard, thick bone. Whereas the opposite of that is the zonov. The zonov, the tail, wiggles, wags around, wiggles around, and there is no bone to it. There's no stiffness to it. Uvachein, what we are basically saying is we should be like a head, be committed, strong, whatever it takes, like the skull of a surrounding the brain. Should be firm in Yiddishkeit and Chassidischkeit and whatever commitment we take for Torah, and not wiggle around like the Zanav.